I'm Danielle Metz.
I'm Robert Vaughn.
And this is the Danielle Metz Show. Quote, no democracy is complete without access to transparent and reliable information. It is the cornerstone for building fair and impartial institutions, holding leaders accountable, and speaking truth to power. Says Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, which is posted on the UN site in celebrating Press Freedom Day, which was May 3rd of this year. Quote, I want them shut down, I want them silenced, I want them muted. I think they're horrible for our society, said Ana Navarro on The View in response to Facebook and its sister site, Instagram, depersoning such dangerous far-right individuals as Paul Joseph Watson, Milo Yiannopoulos, Laura Loomer, Alex Jones, again, and Louis Farrakhan, ironically on the eve of Press Freedom Day. A Facebook spokesperson told CNN Business that the company goes through a lengthy process and takes into consideration a number of factors before determining an individual to be dangerous. So I reviewed Facebook's policy, which defines dangerous individuals and groups as those, quote, who are involved in terrorist activity, organized hate, mass or serial murder, human trafficking, and organized violence or criminal activity. Seems to me that the only Louis Farrakhan is the only one who, definitely not right-wing, fits this definition as the head of the Nation of Islam, a black nationalist organization. Even the Southern Poverty Law Center has described him as anti-Semitic extremist, which may be why he was, safe enough to throw under the bus as a sacrifice to try to deflect the fact that this was targeted against conservative voices. It was a coordinated hit, to which the mainstream media was given prior notice, allowing them to get their articles ready to drop the minute the banning happened. And Facebook is not only banning high-profile people, right-wingers, but has threatened to ban users who uncritically restates opinions or shares content from these unpersons. It seems to me, Robert, that big tech has crossed the line from platform to publisher. In fact, I think they crossed it long ago. I think that they offer services on arbitrary and fraudulent terms while selling our data and bribing Big Brother to continue to allow them to avoid the definition of publisher that would force them to be legally liable for their actions as such. What do you think?
So many things, so little time. I find it interesting, first of all, that they would actually publicize by going to CNN the fact that they're deplatforming these people and mentioning them by name, violating their privacy, if you will, because in a sense there's an unwritten contract between those people and the platform. And so for them to go public, I mean, can you imagine if they went public and says, we're deplatforming Danielle Metz? Like, oh my God, why would you even mention me in a public broadcast or in a press release? That's a violation, I think. Then there's the guilt by association. Louis Farrakhan is a promoter of hatred.
Oh, he
There's
is.
no question about that. Not that that should be necessarily against the law.
I don't want him deplatformed unless he's calling for acts of violence and breaking the law.
And his ideas are dangerous, quite patently dangerous. They are something that is the exact opposite of what the other people who are grouped into that mass purge represent. There's absolutely no way that Paul Joseph Watson is preaching hatred or violence or is dangerous in any way. So there's that aspect of it, and I think that that's by design. That's deliberate. There's no question about it. And there's a couple of proper ways to go about this, and I think some of them have already been mentioned by, I think, Paul Joseph Watson, and that is lawsuits.
Yeah.
I think that if a company went public calling me dangerous, spreading hatred, which is against the law in Canada, I'd have a darn good chance of winning a lawsuit for a lot of money against that person or company. And I think that that's what's absolutely necessary for all of these people to do, whether it be class action or not. But these companies who are singling out so-called conservative, so-called right-wing content providers, calling them dangerous, calling them hate mongers, which is clearly not the case, except perhaps for Louis Farrakhan.
Ironically.
Yes, but by design. Then I think that
yep.
they should be hiring some lawyers and doing what those Coventry kids did and to sue the pants off these platforms, because This can't go on.
Yes, but the question I posed is, are they platforms or should they be treated as publishers? Because
That doesn't matter to me. That's an American distinction based on American law.
Well,
and I understand that distinction is in law in the States.
But the fact is, their platform would be like a telephone company. So therefore, if somebody is committing a crime on the telephone, is the telephone company liable for that? And the answer is no, because it's a platform. It doesn't mitigate, or it doesn't regulate speech on its platform, where a publisher has the ability to regulate speech on its site or its whatever it is, and therefore, because they can control it, therefore they are responsible for it, which would open them up to a whole bunch of lawsuits.
Yeah, this is a very interesting point of law, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really speak to it with any sort of expertise. However, just having thought about it somewhat, I don't think they're a publisher, because they simply cannot. It's an impossibility with over 1 billion people who are publishing. I'm calling them publishers on Facebook, the platform. It's impossible for Facebook, content creators, let's call them that, and who are publishing their content on a platform. But it's impossible, literally and figuratively, impossible to regulate that. So I cannot put the onus on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube to police that unless it's by complaint. There should be a complaint system, and there are complaint systems in place, and they can act on that. But a blanket publishing name to give to these things, no, I don't think so. They're platforms, in my mind, in my estimation. Now,
but what they're doing is they're censoring people based on what would be considered a publisher's prerogative, not a platform prerogative. So that, I think that's where they're trying to draw this distinction, is because a publisher can curate content where a platform isn't supposed to, unless it violates clearly defined terms of services, like no pornography, and what goes against the law. So I think they're really skating that line really thin, and I don't think the U.S. government really wants to come down on this. I really think the U.S. government, well, I'm sure big companies aren't donating to anybody's, coffers or anything like that in the government in the States at all. But I think that's the biggest issue, is the fact that it's not delineated clearly, and the terms and services so arbitrarily defined, and it's fraudulent. Like, oh, here, you can publish here if you don't define these, or you don't defy these terms of service, unless we decide that you did, without any proof.
I think you're in the right direction there. These violations of terms of service, so-called, are so vague, and when they make it public that you violated the terms of service, which include, and they have a whole list of things, including advocating murder and hatred and genocide and things like that, and they say that you violated one of these, but we're not telling you which one and why, then it's left to the public to decide that, oh my God, Paul Joseph Watson is Hitler incarnate, because look at what he's being associated with. Louis Farrakhan, anti-Semite, racist. Look at the terms of service he's alleged to have violated, and it includes some pretty heinous stuff.
Terrorists.
They have to be very specific.
Yeah, and
they say,
also,
they should say, you're being kicked off of Facebook because you said this, which violates this particular terms of service. There's cut and dried. It should be. And then if he wants to dispute it, he can. But until then, I think a court of law is the best way right now to deal with these platforms, and I'll call them platforms for sure. Now, the other aspect of this is that what I said is that the best legal way and proper way at this time to handle these people is lawsuits.
Lawfare,
Huh?
Lawfare, I'm all for it.
No, proper lawsuits, not simply to scare them or terrorize them, but because I think you have a case. The other way, and I'm going back to a Just Right episode I did not too long ago, which it's called "This Is War," wherein, and we're not in a shooting war yet. We're in, however, a war for people's minds, and a legal war, and a political war, a Cold War, if you will. And when you're at war, all bets are off. You can't act civilly which is the way we usually act, especially people on the right
Yep,
are
that's
more civil than on the left.
So much
so,
to our detriment from time to time, because I think we're not as assertive.
That's my point. That's my point, is that our good nature is our worst asset. And it could very well be that the thing that brings down the right, because we cannot be civil in this case. We have to say, we're going to use your own leftist laws against you, even though we don't advocate these laws, in other words, censorship. However, there is a case to be made for saying that, okay, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc., you want to be on the left? Let's play your game. We're going to use government and force arbitrarily and improperly, like you advocate, to shut you down and say, no, as a matter of fact, you have to shut down all the left-wing voices on your platforms.
Yes, you mean
and allow all the right-wings.
And all the ones that are advocating violence, like when, you remember like Peter Fonda with the Donald Trump Jr. or Barron Trump?
Yes, I complained about that.
Yes.
I put in a complaint to Twitter about that.
And did that get taken down? No. And Kathy Griffin holding the decapitated head of Donald Trump.
I complained about Kathy Griffin too.
Antifa still has all their accounts, all their main ones, and they're advocating violence all the time. The rules are not being applied equally, and I think that's where everybody has to come down and call them on. But because people on the right, I think, believe too much in freedom of speech, that, and again, there's that my private business, my private platform, so therefore we don't want the government, but the rules have to be applied equally, and we have to hold them to account for it.
Yes, either in the court of law or, as I said, sometimes during war, you have to do nasty things. I mean, if this was a shooting war, you'd be killing people.
Well, yeah, and if
you'd be killing people and bombing cities.
And if you take it out of public discourse, that's when it becomes violence in the streets, because you're silencing voices that have nowhere else to go, and then that's when violence starts. And that's the biggest problem of all this, especially with social media being as prevalent as it is. And the fact that the left-wing media like CNN and The View are celebrating these people being deplatformed, depersoned, taking off the internet. They love it. They think it's great. They think what is Joy Reid said? We have excesses in our First Amendment and Second Amendment right now. And I don't think the forefathers said that, yeah, you can say all sort of hateful things and spread it around the world. How can you have excesses in a fundamental right? There is no such thing. You can't have too much free speech.
There are consequences to free speech.
There are consequences, but you can't, the more free speech you have, the more you whittle out the voices that aren't deserving. The more you squash free speech, the more those voices go underground and they get more power. And the fact that the left doesn't see this as potentially leading to something like a civil war, whether it be hopefully not violent, but the lines are being drawn in the United States right now in particular, and it's like they said, the left considers the right extreme because the left has gone so far left that the right hasn't moved barely at all, but now they seem extreme in comparison to how far the left has gone. And it without being able to talk about it, without voices being able to be heard, I don't see how this problem's going to solve itself.
Oh, exactly. Free speech is always, it's almost absolute. Like I said, though, there are consequences to your speech, and there should be. However, I think that idea of using their own ideology against them, although you don't advocate it, I think they should come out. President Obama or the Republican Congress, Senate rather, should come out and say, okay, we're going to use the force of law to prevent you from doing what you're doing, and in fact go after you for putting up things like Hamas on Facebook or Hezbollah on Twitter. And this might teach you a lesson. As a matter of fact, I think if they did that, what would happen? Jack and who heads Facebook? I forget his name. Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg.
They might come around. They might turn around and say, okay, you got a point. We give up. You're right. We're going to stop it. Right? I think that's probably what would happen if the government did something like that.
Yeah, but that comes down to the fact that I don't think that the government and these big tech companies are separate. I think they're, as Ezra Levant pointed out in one of his videos about this, is that they've merged. If you look at the people who are high up in Google, high up in Facebook, high up in Twitter, and even in Canada, their Canadian affiliates, they're all left-wing, either Democrat Party hacks in the United States or Liberal Party hacks in Canada. So they're hand in glove. I don't know, we can't use the government to stop this from happening because the government's in bed with them. Even with Donald Trump in the White House, although he has been tweeting about wanting to keep a close eye on the conservative voices being silenced on social media, which has got, again, CNN and the rest of them, oh, how dare he. And he retweeted Paul Joseph Watson. He retweeted Laura Loomer. He retweeted a couple other people, which is good for him. It's nice to see that he's doing that. But on the same, he's still on Twitter. Go to Gab. Make everybody go to Gab. And then you will shut down that platform overnight.
Gab, BitChute.
Yep. Go there.
Minds. What else? I got them on my computer.
Yeah,
MeWe, Minds. Instead of using Gmail, use Proton Mail. I find Proton Mail fantastic.
It's very good.
Yeah.
You got me on that, and I like it. I'm on Gab. I'm on Minds. It's just going to take time to shift everybody over to other platforms. I'm not sure what's going to happen. They call it the public square, and a lot of voices on the right are calling for government intervention about the fact that under the concept that it is a public square. I am not 100% on that bandwagon. However,
no, neither am I.
I, like you said, use their rules against them. But the only way I can see that being effective is if they're declared a publisher of some sort, or create a new category where they can't be responsible for everything. But if they're going to be parsing people, then they're responsible for that. I don't know how that would work legally, but that's where we're at. We're in a new realm here, and it's scary. And the fact that this is, well, it is technically the public square, and we're subject to restrictions based on private companies. Interesting place to be.
Yeah, you brought up something that's interesting, saying that basically the government, you can't rely on government to do this because they're in bed with them. And they are, of course, because it's a cultural phenomenon. There is a pervading ideology that pervades all aspects of life, from the law to politics to the arts to education, and that is an ideology of the left, of that we are our brother's keeper, altruism. And in this cultural war, one of the other battles that people like you and I have to fight is to make sure that a proper ideology gets out there, one which respects individual rights, and one of rational egoism. And the only philosophy that does that, of course, is
capitalism? Objectivism?
Objectivism. Ayn Rand got it right in every respect. And the more that we advocate for the philosophy of Ayn Rand, I think the better society will be. And as a matter of fact, it is a small snowball that is starting to roll downhill and gather.
I've noticed
some
a
steam,
lot more
mixing metaphors.
Interest. Yes, steam. So, but before we conclude, there's a funny thing. Twitter actually banned a parody account of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It was a parody account. It was a little girl that was just saying stuff that you'd think she would say because it was too close to the actual original.
Oh, they didn't ban that one?
Yeah, they did. It's too close to the original material.
She was darling. That was so spot on. It was beautiful.
At least I think that's the one. That's what I heard. By Sticks, Hacks, and Hammer, and a couple other people reported it. But yeah, a parody account because the parody was too close to reality. And that's
this is impersonations. What would they do with the Kevin Spacey? You know, oh, Kevin Spacey, you did too good an impersonation of Obama, and you said nasty things using his voice. That we're going to.
Or Alec Baldwin doing Trump. Wait, no, that's a right winger. You're allowed to. You can take care of him. That's fine.
No, that's impossible. I can't. Oh, that is sad. That really is sad. She was good. Oh well.
I'm assuming that's the account they're talking about. I don't follow Twitter too much, which I should get back on. But yeah. So I'm not sure what to do with this. I'm not sure where it's going to go. I'm not sure Well, we'll do our part as best we can. Again, I wish we'd get banned because we'd get more notoriety because notice that gets public. So here I am closing another show, hoping to get banned yet again. Maybe I should talk more about what Paul Joseph Watson said, and maybe that'll get me banned. So until then, if they don't ban us, we'll see you soon and talk again soon. Cheers. That was a really lousy ending, but whatever.
If you've enjoyed this presentation, visit justrightmedia.org for more programming that's not right-wing, it's just right.